Cat cries after owner dies. Vet reads collar. Oh my God! Dr. Michael Hayes had seen countless heartbroken animals in his 15 years as a shelter veterinarian, but nothing prepared him for what he was about to discover on a seemingly ordinary Tuesday morning. The cat in cage 17 wouldn't stop crying. For 3 days straight, Oliver's mournful wails had echoed through the Riverside Animal Shelter in Springfield, keeping staff awake at night and breaking the hearts of everyone who passed by. The orange tabby sat hunched in the corner, tears streaming down his whiskers, refusing food, refusing comfort, just endless, soul-crushing grief. "He's mourning," Sarah, Michael's assistant, had said sadly. "The woman who brought him in said her husband just died. Poor thing misses his owner." But when Michael knelt down that morning to examine the inconsolable feline, something on the worn leather collar caught his eye. He squinted, leaned closer, and carefully turned the tarnished metal tag toward the light. His blood ran cold. "Oh my God," he whispered, his hands beginning to tremble. "What is it?" Sarah rushed over, alarmed by the color draining from his face. Michael looked up at her, then back at the tag, his mind racing. "Call the woman who dropped him off, right now." "Why? What's wrong?" "The name on this collar," Michael's voice was barely audible. "It's not the woman's name. It's not her husband's name. Sarah, I think this cat was stolen." Sarah rushed over and saw the concerned look on her boss's face. "What's wrong, Dr. Hayes?" she asked, glancing between him and Oliver, still huddled in a corner. "It's just that," Michael began hesitantly. "The woman who brought him in said her last name was Thompson, but that's not what's written on the medallion." Sarah frowned. "Yes, the woman's name was Rachel Thompson, and she said the cat only answered to the name Felix. The family was struggling to care for him and made the difficult decision to leave him at the shelter. Rachel promised she would come back for him as soon as she could." Michael nodded thoughtfully and took another look at the collar. "But then why doesn't the medallion say Felix Thompson? I saw a different name." That evening, Michael sat alone in his office, flipping through Oliver's file. Something about this whole story kept bothering him. He recalled Rachel's words as she cried while leaving him, assuring them that she and Felix had tried everything to keep the cat. Why then this inconsistency in the name? Something didn't add up. The next morning, Michael returned to see Oliver in his enclosure. The cat was still huddled up and barely lifted his head when he entered. In a soft voice, Michael began talking to him. "Hey, Oliver, I know this is hard. You miss your home, don't you?" He held a small treat in his hand and gently placed it near Oliver's paws. Oliver sniffed it, but his distrust persisted. Michael sat on the floor and continued speaking in a soothing voice, telling him anecdotes about his own pets and their little quirks. After a while, Oliver began to nibble slowly and cautiously. Michael could tell the cat was still suffering deeply, but a glimmer of trust was beginning to appear. Days passed, and Michael continued spending time with Oliver. With each visit, the cat seemed a bit more open, until Michael finally dared to reach toward his collar. "Let me just take a look, okay?" he murmured gently. But as soon as he touched the leather strap, Oliver jumped and hissed violently. Michael pulled his hand back and sighed. "What happened to you, Oliver? Why do you hold on to that collar so tightly?" Deep down, he was convinced that the mystery of the medallion was the key. He decided to approach the problem methodically. Without removing Oliver's collar, he took a photo of the medallion to examine the engraving more closely. Enlarging the image on his screen, he gasped. The engraved name was barely legible, worn and scratched, but a series of letters stood out clearly. Emily Parker. Troubled, Michael leaned back in his chair and thought, who was Emily Parker? Why was Oliver wearing that name? 1,000 questions swirled in his mind. He began searching online and eventually found a woman by that name in a neighboring town. His curiosity was piqued, and he decided to follow this lead. But before he could act, Sarah appeared at the door. Dr. Hayes, is everything okay? Michael nodded, though his mind was still racing. I think I've discovered something about Oliver, he said quietly. We need to talk to this Emily. Michael couldn't get the revelation of Emily Parker's name on Oliver's collar out of his mind. Who was this woman, and what connection did she have to the Thompsons? To clarify the situation, he decided to go to the address he had found during his research. The next morning, Michael hit the road toward the small town where Emily was supposed to live. The wind pushed dead leaves across the road as his car drove through the peaceful residential neighborhoods. He stopped in front of a modest house whose well-kept garden testified to meticulous maintenance. A growing nervousness took hold of him, but he knew he had to get answers, not only for himself, but especially for Oliver. He got out of the car, walked up to the door, and knocked firmly but politely. After a few moments, a middle-aged woman opened the door. Her gaze was tired but kind. "Can I help you?" she asked cautiously. "Hello, my name is Dr. Michael Hayes. I'm a veterinarian at the Riverside Shelter in Springfield. I'm sorry to bother you, but we have a cat with us who's wearing a collar with your name on it. Could you help me understand?" Emily looked surprised and studied Michael carefully before opening the door a bit wider. "A cat with my name? That's strange. Please, come in." The interior of the house was simple but warm, decorated with photographs hanging on the wall and a softly crackling fireplace. Emily gestured to a couch where he sat down, while she took a seat in an armchair across from him. "How can I help you?" she asked with curiosity. Michael hesitated for a moment and took a deep breath. "We recently took in a cat at the shelter. His name is Oliver, but his collar has the engraving Emily Parker. Does that mean anything to you?" Emily froze. Her eyes welled up with tears, and she brought a hand to her mouth, visibly overwhelmed. "Oliver! My God, you're talking about my Oliver?" she murmured, her voice trembling. Michael nodded slowly. "I don't know exactly how he ended up at the shelter. He was brought in by a woman named Rachel Thompson, who claimed he belonged to her late husband. But the engraving on the collar—" Emily took a deep breath and wiped a tear rolling down her cheek. "Oliver was my cat. He disappeared 6 years ago. I tried everything to find him, posted flyers, searched the neighborhood, but he had vanished. At the time, we had moved and he escaped during a walk. Losing him was a terrible ordeal." The emotion in her voice touched Michael deeply. He could easily imagine the pain she had felt at the time. "I'm truly sorry for what you went through," he said with compassion. Emily gave a faint smile. "You say he's at the shelter? Is he okay?" "Yes, physically he's healthy, but he's sad. He seems to miss his home and is wary of strangers. It looks like he's been through some difficult times." Overwhelmed by memories, Emily let her emotions flow freely. "I never stopped thinking about him. He was my faithful companion since I adopted him as a kitten from another shelter. We were inseparable." Michael observed her kindly. "Would you like to see him? Maybe he'll recognize you." Emily nodded eagerly, wiping away fresh tears. "Yes, please. I'd give anything to see him again." They drove together to the shelter. Throughout the journey, Michael noticed that Emily often looked out the window, as if internally reliving the years of separation. When they finally arrived, he led her to the enclosure where Oliver was. The cat, huddled in a corner, only briefly lifted his head when Michael opened the door. But when Emily softly spoke his name, something changed. His ears twitched, and he slowly raised his head, his green eyes suddenly alert and curious. Emily knelt before the cage and extended her hand through the bars. "Oliver, my treasure, do you remember me?" Hesitant, Oliver approached cautiously, sniffed her hand, then began to purr softly. A profound calm filled the room, and Michael couldn't help but smile. Finally, the cat pressed against the bars, and Emily let tears of relief and happiness flow. Watching them, Michael knew he had made the right decision. Yet one question remained. How had Oliver ended up with the Thompsons? The mystery was still intact, and Michael knew he had to dig deeper. Now that Emily and Oliver had been reunited, part of the cat's grief seemed to have dissipated. But Michael couldn't help wondering how Oliver had spent his last 6 years with the Thompsons. He had to lift this final veil of uncertainty. The next day, Michael decided to pay another visit to the Thompson family. This time, he headed to the large house on the outskirts of town where Rachel Thompson lived. The driveway was long and lined with old oak trees, casting their shadows on the impeccably maintained lawn. Michael parked his car and took a deep breath before walking to the door and knocking. After a brief moment, a young blonde woman opened the door. "Hello, I'm Dr. Michael Hayes. I'm here about Oliver. I'd like to speak with Rachel Thompson." The young woman looked surprised. "Oh, Mom's not home right now, but I'm Lisa Thompson, her daughter. Can I help you in any way?" Michael thought for a moment, then nodded. "Actually, I'd like to understand how Oliver came to you. There are some inconsistencies, and I'd like to know more about his past." Lisa looked intrigued. "Mom brought him home 6 years ago. She said she found him injured on the side of the road. Dad treated him at the time. Oliver was terrified and wouldn't let anyone approach him." Michael frowned. "Do you know if he was already wearing a collar at that time?" Lisa thought for a moment. "Yes, Mom mentioned it. She said it was old and worn, but Oliver refused to let anyone remove it, so they preferred to leave it on him. Dad thought it was better to avoid stressing him out." Michael nodded thoughtfully. "That makes sense. But the name on the collar doesn't match your father or your mother. Do you know if your mother tried to find his owner?" Lisa hesitated. "I think she contacted a shelter at the time, but no missing reports matched his description, so she decided to keep him. Dad took care of him a lot until his death. After that, Oliver was even sadder. Mom said he looked for him for weeks." Michael felt a wave of compassion wash over him. That explains why Oliver seems so defeated. He lost his first owner, then the man who saved him. That must have been a real trauma for him. Lisa's gaze clouded with sadness. He adored Dad. They spent hours together in the garden, and Oliver always sat on his lap. I think he had adopted him as his new human. Michael sighed softly. "Thank you, Lisa. This helps me better understand the situation. I hope Oliver can finally find peace now that he's back with Emily." As he was about to leave, a car pulled into the driveway. Rachel Thompson quickly got out of the vehicle and, seeing Michael, rushed over. "Dr. Hayes, has something happened to Oliver?" Michael shook his head. "No, he's fine. I just wanted to know how you found him back then."
Rachel looked relieved, but her gaze became thoughtful. "Oh, it was a terrible sight. He was lying on the side of the road, completely emaciated and injured. Felix insisted on bringing him home and treating him. We searched everywhere for clues, but no one ever came forward. I never imagined he already had a family." Michael gave her a gentle smile. "It seems he did. Emily Parker was his owner. She looked for him for years. But I believe he loved you too, you and Felix." Rachel wiped a tear from the corner of her eye. "I just wanted to give him a home. I didn't know he already had one. But I'm glad he was loved and cherished with us." With a comforting smile, Michael finally took his leave and headed back to the shelter. On the way, he reflected on the irony of the situation. Oliver had known 2 families. He had loved and suffered, and now he was finally going to reunite with his original owner. Back at the shelter, he found Emily in Oliver's enclosure. Both seemed at peace, and the cat was perched on her lap. "Is everything settled?" she asked softly. "Yes, it was just a misunderstanding. Oliver had the chance to meet 2 people who loved him. Now he's with you again, and I think that's what's best for him." Emily gently stroked the cat's fur and smiled. "Thank you, Michael. I'll do everything to make him feel at home again." Michael left the shelter with a deep sense of relief. Oliver had finally reached his destination, and his long journey, marked by sadness and loss, had found a peaceful end. Yet Michael couldn't help but reflect on the depth of the bond between a human being and an animal, and how sometimes loving also means knowing when to let go to find peace. The days following Oliver's return to Emily's home were filled with gentle serenity. The cat seemed to have regained his balance, and Emily did everything to make him feel at home again. A few weeks later, Michael received a message from Lisa Thompson. She thanked him for his help and told him that she and her mother had decided to adopt a new cat to fill the void left by Oliver. She wanted to give a new chance to an animal from the shelter. Michael was delighted with the news and promised to help them choose.
A few days later, Lisa and her mother Rachel came to the shelter together. They walked through the cages until a black and white cat caught their attention. Her name was Bella, and she was known for her playful temperament and unwavering courage. Rachel knelt before her cage and gently extended her hand. Bella sniffed it before delicately licking her fingers. "She seems to like you," Lisa said with a smile. Rachel nodded and wiped a tear from the corner of her eye. "I think she's exactly what we need, a new family member." Michael helped them finalize the paperwork, and soon Bella was able to discover her new home. When the two women left the shelter with their new friend, Michael couldn't help but smile. Oliver's story had not only touched his heart, but also the hearts of others, proving once again just how powerful the bond between a human being and an animal could be. Back at Emily's house, Oliver sat on the windowsill, watching the birds in the garden. Emily approached him and gently stroked his back. "You're an adventurer, my treasure, but now you're home." Oliver purred contentedly and placed his head in Emily's hand. For him, the long journey to his true home was finally over, and he knew he was loved no matter where life had taken him. Michael stayed a while longer with them, and all three spent the evening in peaceful silence, while Oliver, curled up in a ball, slept on Emily's lap. Michael couldn't help but wonder if the cat remembered everything he had been through. But deep down, it didn't matter. He was home, and that was all that counted. With a feeling of satisfaction mixed with a touch of melancholy, Michael finally said goodbye. On the way back, he thought about everything Oliver had endured, but also about the luck he had: 2 families, 2 lives, and a story woven by chance and destiny. Sometimes, Michael thought, love doesn't consist of possessing someone, but of letting them go and giving them the freedom to return. And Oliver had found his way back, both into Emily's heart and into Rachel's. 1 cat, 2 families, and twice as much love. Oliver's story reminds us that every shelter animal has a past, a story, and a heart waiting to love again. If this tale touched you, consider visiting your local animal shelter. There are countless cats and dogs like Oliver, some lost, some abandoned, all deserving of a second chance. Maybe you'll find your own Oliver waiting for you. Share this story with someone who loves animals, and let's help more pets find their way home. What do you think happened to Oliver during those 6 missing years? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you.